One of the problems with custom fonts is that the user may encounter what we call a flash of unstyled text, which basically means while the browser is downloading our custom font, it's going to use a fallback font and our text may appear unstyled. Let me show you this in action. So I'm going to open up Chrome DevTools. Now we go to the Network tab. First, we want to check this box, Disable Cache. Cache is some kind of permanent storage that browsers use to store the assets behind a website. For example, as we visit web pages, the browser may store some images or font files in its cache. In this demo, we want to disable caching so all the resources behind this page get downloaded every time we refresh the page, okay? Now, we're going to refresh the page by pressing Command and R on Mac or Control and R on Windows. All right, so here are all the resources downloaded from the server. We have index.html, a couple of CSS files, and a couple of font files. Now look at the time that was spent on downloading these fonts. It was 8 milliseconds. This is super fast because I'm accessing this website locally on my computer. But what if the user is on a slow connection? We can simulate that. So over here, we have this drop-down list called throttling. We can change this to fast 3G to simulate a 3G connection, or slow 3G, or we can go offline. So let's select slow 3G and refresh the page one more time. All right, this time it's taking longer to download these resources. Now, finally, okay. Look, it took 2.7 seconds to download these font files. Now let's see what the user is going to experience. So back to the page, I'm going to refresh the page one more time. While the browser is downloading these resources, I want you to pay close attention to this paragraph. Initially, this paragraph is going to have a different font. That is going to be our fallback font. So back to our style sheet, look at the rule for the body element. We set the font to Open Sans, Arial, Helvetica, and so on. While the browser is downloading Open Sans, it's going to show either Arial or Helvetica. So let's refresh the page. Take a look. All right, here's the Arial or Helvetica. Now, after 2 seconds, the font changed to Open Sans. This is what we call a flash of unstyled text. So during a short period of time, our text may appear unstyled. Now, the problem is that sometimes when working on more complex pages, when the new font is applied, we may end up with layout shifts. So some elements might move around on the page, and this may create a bad experience for the user. Now, unfortunately, we cannot avoid this. There are techniques we can use to minimize this problem, but we cannot completely avoid it because we're using a custom font that should be downloaded on the user's computer. So back to our style sheet, where we use the font face rule, we can use the font display property to tell the browser how it should handle this scenario. The default value is auto, which lets the browser decide what should be done while the custom font is being downloaded. Unfortunately, this behavior is different from one browser to another. So the current version of Chrome initially uses a fallback font and then swaps it with the custom font when it's available. Now, some other browsers have a different approach. They initially hide the text while the font is being downloaded. This is what we call a flash of invisible text. So we don't want to use auto. We want to have explicit control over this behavior. So we can set it to swap. And with this, we get the exact behavior you just saw. So the browser is going to use a fallback font and then swap it with the custom font when it's available. Now, there's a problem here. If it takes the browser 10 seconds to download this custom font, the swapping will still happen. So if the user is in the middle of reading something, then after 10 seconds, the new font will be applied and the user may experience a layout shift. So a better approach is to use fallback. With this, we tell the browser to use a fallback font and we give it a short window to download and use the custom font. So if the custom font is not downloaded within that short period, the fallback font is going to be used. So it's better than waiting for, let's say, 10 seconds for the custom font to be loaded. Another possible value here is block, which is something you should never use because this is going to hide the text initially and wait for the font to be downloaded. Now, the problem is if the font never gets downloaded, the text will never become visible. Let me show you how this happens. So let's save the changes. Now back to the browser. I'm going to refresh the page. Look, the text is initially invisible, and then after the font was downloaded, the text became visible. Now, what if the font was never downloaded? Perhaps because of network errors. Then we would never see the text. So don't ever use the block value. Now, one last value we have here is optional, which I think gives us the best experience, but of course, that is subjective. With optional, you're telling the browser that this font is optional and nice to have. It's not critical. So just like fallback, we're giving the browser a short window to download and use this font. If it doesn't happen, the browser is not going to swap the font. But behind the scene, it will try to download the font and store it in its cache. That is the permanent storage I told you about. Now, in subsequent page loads, the browser is going to take that font from the cache and use it on this page. So with this, the user is never going to notice a significant layout change. The only problem with this approach is that the font will be different on the first page load. That's the only problem. So this is all about the font display property. Now there's another tool to reduce a flash of unstyled text. In the last lesson, we talked about the web font generator on Font Squirrel. There we use the optimal setting. But here we also have expert setting, where we can use a technique called subsetting to reduce the font size. So if we set this to custom subsetting, now we can choose the characters that should be included in our font. For example, we can say we need lowercase letters, uppercase letters, numbers, punctuations, currency. I'm not quite sure what typography this is, but maybe we don't want math symbols. Maybe we don't want lower or upper accents. In case you're not familiar with these characters, let me show you. So down below, you can see a preview of these characters. So upper accents are these special characters that are used in European languages. Maybe we don't have any of these characters on our website. All we have is just pure English text. If that's the case, then we can use subsetting to reduce the font size.